Ma'am, you can switch off your camera.
Live is confirmed.
Namaste parents. My heartiest felicitations go out to Shri Educare for launching yet another school, the Shri Ram Academy, all the way in Hyderabad. Congratulations, Miss Sindhura and Miss Aishwarya. It was just 5 years back that TSUS came into being, and 5 years on, yet another milestone. What a wonderful start. Padma Shri Mrs. Manju Bharatram had a dream. She started the Shri Ram schools in Delhi and Gurgaon all the way in 1988. Schools grew from strength to strength, from national to international. So the Shri Ram Academy is born with a spirit of internationalism. The Shri Ram students, when they leave the portals of our school, they carry with them values, compassion, empathy, courage of conviction, and loads more. And that's why we are here. So parents, get ready to welcome Shri Ram Academy. It's a school that believes in the child. Child centricity is what we stand for, what we believe in. Once again, heartiest congratulations. Thank you.
Namaste parents. If your little ones are ready to set foot on a formal educational journey, this is for you all. If I ask you today, you have a chance to revive your long lost passion, how many of you think that you'd be able to do it without the fear of failure? Now, is this fear of failure good or bad? While some of you may say that it is good because it drives your energy towards attaining excellence, others might contend by saying that it causes psychological distress and impacts long-term performance. But I am more interested in knowing that where this fear is coming from. Has it got something to do with the way we view excellence in the first place? Cannot the pursuit of excellence be joyful in nature? There's a difference between perfectionism and joyful pursuit of excellence. Perfectionism is the byproduct of fear, whereas joyful pursuit of excellence is about achieving what you're capable of authentically and joyfully. Thank you so much for sparing your 1 minute. That was Joyful Pursuit of Excellence, one of the core values at TSRA, where we innovate, create, and collaborate every step of the way. Namaste.
Namaste, and a very warm welcome to one and all. The Shri Ram Academy strongly believes that growth and nurturance occur when there is an amalgamation of robust teaching and learning approaches. In this regard, the school brings to you a series of webinars wherein we share deeper insights about our philosophy and pedagogy at the Shri Ram Academy. In this series, the first webinar was conducted on young children as powerful learners. And now we welcome you to the second webinar on the joy of learning education for the future. On behalf of Ms. Sindhura Indukuri and Ms. Aishwarya Kura, Managing Directors of the Shri Ram Hyderabad Schools, Dr. Jyoti Reddy, Director of Education, the Shri Ram Hyderabad Schools, and the Founder Principal of the Shri Ram Universal School, Ms. Nisha Chandan, Vice President Operations, the Shri Ram Hyderabad Schools, Ms. Sunita Gujila, Deputy Head of the Shri Ram Academy, Mr. Sheelam Seth, Chief Executive Officer, Shri Educare Limited, and Ms. Sapna Yadav, Vice President Operations, International Curriculum, Shri Educare Limited. I extend a warm welcome to our honorable guests for today, Ms. Monita Sen, International Baccalaureate Primary Years Program, Authorization Manager, and Mr. Mahesh Balakrishnan, Development and Recognition Manager, India and Nepal International Baccalaureate. I also welcome educators from India and abroad who have joined us through Zoom and Facebook, and staff and parents from the Shri Ram Universal School and the Shri Ram Academy family. Without further ado, Let me introduce you to our keynote speaker for today, Ms. Monita Sen. Monita Sen has over 21 years experience in education in a variety of roles, including both teaching and leadership positions. She began her career as an early years Montessori teacher and has been involved in setting up early childhood centers in India. Ms. Monita Sen joined the IB office in Singapore in 2012 as the PYP Regional Manager. She currently works with the International Baccalaureate as the Primary Years Program Authorization Manager, providing support to schools implementing the Primary Years Program as they work towards becoming an IB World School. Ms. Monita is passionate about working with early years educators in the PYP to share stories of good practice across contexts. She has also designed and led workshops and training sessions for teachers and heads, both within and outside IB frameworks. Ms. Monita holds a master's degree in education and English literature and is currently undertaking Doctor of Education with the University of Bath. Her areas of interest and research include early childhood, creativity, learner agency, STEM, and transdisciplinary approaches to learning. We are extremely happy and filled with gratitude to have you joining us today. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much for that warm welcome. It's always embarrassing to hear someone talk about you in this way. I feel like, oh, that's not very modest, but thank you. It's so great to be here with you all today. It's a great opportunity, and I'd really like to thank the Shri Ram Academy group for inviting me. It's not often I get this opportunity now that I'm not in a school to talk to parents. So it's very exciting to be with you all. As mentioned before, my name is Monita, and my role is currently with the IB. I support schools, new schools that are coming into the IB to become PYP schools. So today I'm super excited to talk to you about the joy of learning, and I'm just going to share my screen so you can actually see my presentation. Okay, hopefully you can see that. Give me a nod. Yes, great. Okay. So I was very excited when I was invited to speak about this topic, because every year I choose a word for the year, and my word for 2022 is joy. So imagine my surprise when I was invited to give a presentation on the joy of learning. It was clearly meant to be. So thank you once again for that. So I want to really start off with a question for you, especially for many of our parents who are here today. What is joy for you? And if you can type in the chat box, or if you just want to think about it in your mind, I'd like you to think of something right now that brings you joy. What is it? Is it that morning cup of coffee? Is it, being with loved ones, particularly now? For me, it's been 2 years since I saw my sister, and she's here right now. So that really, truly has brought me joy. Or it might be, just seeing your children happy. Can be many things, simple things that give us joy, completing a task at home or at work, a variety of things. Joy is a very deep emotion. And it's very connected to especially at this time in COVID. I think we're learning to find joy in different ways. It's been challenging for us. We've had many difficult things to overcome. But have you noticed that you're finding your joy in different ways? And that perhaps you're appreciating smaller things now that we can't perhaps do the things or travel the way that we used to. But we as humans, we have an innate need for joy. It's part of who we are. And actually, there's quite, while preparing for this presentation, I did a little bit of research about joy. And there are a number of definitions, but I quite like this piece of research that says that joy isn't the same as cheer or happiness or enjoyment. And in fact, you can experience joy without looking joyful. Sometimes there are tears of joy, right? But it has this quality of perception, of seeing and being seen, of hearing and being heard. And really just those feelings of wonderment and excitement, but also disturbance. That cognitive dissonance can also create joy and excitement for us. So, when we're thinking about joy, it's many things, right? It is quite complicated, but we know it when we feel it, right? And what about young children? So also as part of preparing for today, I'm in touch with a couple of children, and I asked them to explain to me a time when they felt joy in their learning. And one boy, Kian, he said, well, for me, it was when I learned Taekwondo with my master. And it's so much fun. And for him, joy really came out of the fact that he was doing this fun activity. He was engaged, but he was doing it with his brother. So the fact that he was with someone, a member of his family, his brother, that really gave him joy. For Isla, she felt joy when she does science at school. Particularly, she talked about this one experience of making a crystal. So for her, that opportunity to create something and to watch it grow, that really gave her joy in learning. So it's really interesting to hear children's perspectives, particularly young children. I think when we think of the picture of a joyful learner, we do see a young child because they're naturally, innately joyful when they learn. If you think about their brain development, the brain is wanting to learn. Those synaptic connections are developing. So it's really, they're wired for joyful learning. Perhaps as they get older, and if you have a teenager, you're wondering, what happens to the joy there? uh, but when we think about education, it might not be something that we directly think of as joy, because schooling as such is not always a joyful experience for children. But that should not be the case. And that's today what I'm going to focus my discussion on, is really a definition of joyful learning that I have sort of come together from reading things and from talking to these children. I try to create a small definition of what I think joyful learning actually is. So I think it can be defined as something that is purposeful, because when it's about learning, there has to be a purpose of why you're doing it, and that is engaging in itself. So joyful learning engages learners. It fills them with that sense of wonder, that aha moment, and also a sense of achievement. Because joyful learning can also be challenging. It's sometimes so much more joyful when you've had a hard time to accomplish something and it's been challenging, rather than something that's been easy. It's also something that's significant and relevant. So if we look at the examples from the children, it was something that was personally meaningful to them. It was relevant to their world, to their life, to their interests. So joyful learning is very much connected to what we call intrinsic motivation, that motivation that we have within. It's also something that's emotionally and intellectually satisfying, and it promotes what we call a sense of agency. And I'm going to talk about agency a little bit later, but really for now, think of agency as the opposite of helplessness. So it's someone who is really enabled. So joyful learning incorporates all these things. As you can see, it's quite a big idea, quite a big complex. And I work very closely, and I have for the last 22 years in different kinds of roles with the primary years program. And I think it's something that totally embodies all of that description of joyful learning. Even as a teacher, I think when I became a PYP teacher, it was a really joyful experience for me. So much so that when the school I was in decided they weren't going to go with PYP, I left that school and I moved to another school that did offer the PYP, because I was so engaged by this idea. So this that you see on the screen here is really, we're a curriculum framework, and in the IB we have 4 programs that we offer to 3 different age groups of children, and the primary years program is offered to children aged 3 to 6. But of course, you probably know more about the diploma program that gets all of the all of the press coverage, and that's the one for children who are age 16 to 18. But today I'm going to focus on the primary years program. And hopefully you in the audience have children age 3 to 12, so you can relate to this as well. And I'm going to just break down this model in a very short way. Don't worry, I'm not going to go into too much detail, and just make connections to the aspects of the program that I think really connect to joy. And I'm going to start with quoting one of my favorite theorists. His name is Henry Giraud. I don't know if you've heard with him. He's also quite a cultural critic. And he said, all education is a struggle over what kind of future you want for young people. And really for you as parents, this is really key. So deciding what education you want for your children is really about what are the values that you have and the future that you want for your child. So that's very much built into the IB mission statement, where we in the IB define what is important to us. And our mission statement that you see here on the slide really answers, I think, 3 questions. The first one is why? Why IB? Why? What's the purpose? And really, our purpose is about creating a better and more peaceful world through intercultural understanding and respect. And that we know more than ever. You just have to watch the news today to know that that is a really important goal. So that's what we believe is the purpose of education. Yes, getting a job is important, having a happy life, but this really making our world, our planet, a more peaceful and better place to live is at the heart of what we believe in IB. How do we do that? And that's in the second paragraph. We work with schools, governments, and other organizations related to education to develop these challenging programs that we have. And what does that look like? What do these programs do? Really, the aim of the programs is to help students become active and compassionate lifelong learners. And I love this last sentence where it says, we can understand that other people with their differences can also be right. I often quote that when I'm in a disagreement with somebody and it isn't going anywhere. I say, well, you know, other people, we have difference of opinions. We can both be right. We could both be wrong also. So that's really at the heart, and that defines the purpose. So joy in learning in IB programs is connected to this mission, and it's driven by this mission statement. And what that looks like in action is really, we call it the learner profile. So in IB programs, and this goes across all of them, a joyful learner is somebody who demonstrates these 10 attributes that you see here on the screen. So someone who is curious to learn, someone who's caring, someone who takes, you know, risks in terms of being courageous, they're confident, they're open-minded, and they think critically and as well as creatively. They communicate in different ways, but they're also balanced. You know, they don't do too much of one. There's no overdrive. And they're generally open-minded and reflective about what they're learning. So that's really at the core driving all of the IB programs. And thinking about, a lot of you I know are asking, okay, so what's different about an IB program versus what I did in school and what my children are doing in school now? And I think one of the biggest differences that from my experience is that, you know, when we were in school, and I'm guessing that some of you are probably around the same age as me, the world was a very different place, right? You as a 5-year-old and your 5-year-old right now have a very different experience. And most of our educational systems are still actually based on the first industrial revolution. And you may have heard people talking now about the fourth industrial revolution, where we're moving into artificial intelligence and, you know, the cyber world. We've pretty much been online, haven't we, for the last 18 months? Life has been virtual. So thinking about these experiences and the context for children at this time, learning really has to look very different. And according to Brown Martin, and he talks a lot about the fourth industrial revolution, he connecting to curriculum, he says we have to de-silo the curriculum. So we have to stop looking at curriculum as a compartmentalized math, science, all these things separate. We need to look at learning as an integrated experience that helps children solve problems collaboratively, because that's really what they're going to have to do when they are in their lives, when they grow up. And they really need to work alongside machines and technology rather than competing with them. So what does this mean then for the way that we approach learning and teaching, given that we've got the mission and the values embedded there, and we've got this context of the world that we're living in? So the IB commits to a set of approaches to learning and teaching, and that's that next circle there, that really align with what we believe in. And what that might look like is a bit different from what we traditionally went through as learners in school, and from what other schools might be doing. So it's very much based on inquiry, which is a view that learners construct their own meaning. So it's very learner-centered, and it's about children actively engaging in making meaning of the world around them. It's focused on concepts. Yes, there is content and there are facts, but they're at the very lower level of learning. It's about developing broader conceptual understandings that you can transfer. So knowing the names of when and dates of when a battle happened are important, but actually understanding the context of war as a concept and conflict as a concept is more important, because you can transfer that knowledge. We really value local and global context. So we want children to first look at make connections with the world around them, particularly very young children in the early years, first for them, it's about me, right? Me, my world, my family, and then my city and my town. But we're moving outwards also to seeing how that's relevant to an international world and a global context. We focus a lot on collaboration. And yes, even in this time when we're working in such an isolated way, collaboration is an important part of building and learning from others, really what we call social constructivism, where we help and learn from, we help others to learn. We believe that all learners are unique. And so learning, therefore, can't be one size fits all. It needs to address what we call learner variability. And that doesn't just mean maybe I have a special learning need. It means that all of us have unique needs. And education needs to be designed, learning needs to be designed in a variety of ways so that we can engage with it. And finally, looking at assessment, which is absolutely integrated with learning and teaching. You can't separate these things. So assessment, we look at 4 dimensions of assessment, which is rigorous, and it's continuously monitoring, documenting, measuring, and reporting learning, and helping students to be what we call assessment capable, so that they can monitor and self-regulate their own learning. So those are the key approaches to teaching. And alongside that, we have approaches to learning, which is really the learning how to learn. So you imagine a split screen. One aspect, you're learning this, you're learning about this, but you're also at the same time learning research skills. You're learning thinking skills and communication and social and self-management skills. So these are also really important. You may have heard these referred to as 21st century skills, right? But skills transcend knowledge areas. And these are the things that will equip children to be able to engage in a future that we don't know what it's going to look like, right? So together, these approaches to teaching and learning really make learning relevant, significant, challenging, and engaging. And that really is what makes it joyful. That's part of that definition of being a joyful learner. Next, in that next circle, we talk about something called agency, which is really linked to our view of the child. So in IB, we don't view the child as an empty vessel or a blank tablet that comes in that needs to be filled up with knowledge. We believe that children have an innate sense of agency. They come preloaded with lots of experiences. They're learning from, well before they're born. Even in utero, there's learning that's happening. So that view of the child honors the child, and the education approach that matches that really looks at how do we give children voice in their own learning and empower and enable them. How do we provide choice so that they know what they need and they can engage in things that are interesting and things that they're passionate about, whether it's taekwondo or crystals? And how can we help them feel a sense of ownership? Because when they do that, they will really begin to self-regulate. And that's the type of learner that we want to develop and is a joyful learner. So that's what we mean when we talk about a sense of agency. And everything that we do is based on that principle. It's linked quite closely to this idea of action as well. And what we mean specifically in the PYP when we talk about action, it's about, okay, you've learned something. Yes, that's great. So that's what. But now, so what? What about that? Now what? What next? What's the point of learning if we don't do something about it? So this idea of action is very much built into the learning design within PYP that encourages children to participate in their learning, whether it's just something like, okay, I learned about this today at school, and I came home and I thought about it, and I asked my mom or my grandma, and I got a book and I took it to school. That's a type of action. But also things like advocacy, social justice, social entrepreneurship, or lifestyle choices. I used to teach, when I first started teaching, I taught grade 2. And one day at a parent meeting, the parents said to me, what's going on at school? Because you're talking about animals, and suddenly my daughter said that she doesn't want to eat any chicken, and she's changed her complete diet because of what we're learning, and now I have to change what I cook for her. So I said, yeah, well, she's taking action. That's her decision on what she's learning. So if you're in a PYP school, be prepared to be questioned by your children around things that they're learning. And lastly, when we're thinking about the curriculum, so what sort of curriculum do we have in the IB, and what sort of curriculum engages children in joyful learning? So one of the good things about IB and PYP is that we don't actually prescribe a specific content that all schools in primary years have to engage with, because we recognize as a framework that a school in Australia, a school in India, a school in the United States has different contexts. And that's very important to us, that that local context is honored. So schools can choose the curriculum content. What we do say is you need to be committed to a transdisciplinary approach. And really that's a connected, a way that we organize the curriculum so that children can make connections and they can get different perspectives. So let's just dive into that, because I think this is one of the biggest differences for parents when you come into a PYP school, that learning is organized very differently from what you're used to in terms of, okay, we've got maths, we've got language, we've got social studies, science, and the timetable looks like this. All those elements are still there, but they're organized in a different way because they're organized by concepts and through units of inquiry. So instead of doing different subjects, children will engage in units of inquiry. So what does that actually look like for you? So let's look at an example. When we were in school, this is very much how my schooling looked. We had a disciplinary model. So we had maths, language, science, social studies, we had the arts as well. But these were the core subject areas, and you may have had one teacher or you may have had different teachers, and you learned about basic operations, data handling in math, you learned about types of text, writing, traits, reading comprehension. In language, then you also, in science, the living things, ecosystems, habitats, all of these things. And in social studies, we did maps, didn't we? And I remember drawing all those maps on the map of India. So this is really how it looked. It was quite compartmentalized. Sometimes there might be something that was common in science and social studies, but we were driven by the textbook. So if the textbook chapters didn't align, we probably weren't learning them at the same time, right? So this is really a disciplinary model that's quite traditional. So if you take the same content and you put that in a transdisciplinary lens, it's really about how it starts off. Instead of being about the subject, it starts off being about the concept. So the unit might just start with this photograph that you see right in the middle of this polar bear on a very tiny, tiny bit of ice. And, we might ask children, what do you understand for this? What feeling does it create in you when you see this? And through those provocations, you really come to this idea. In each unit, we have something called a central idea, which in this case is about interacting humans and their environments and the impacts on that, driven by these concepts of change, causation, and responsibility. So children are engaging in mathematics because they're going to be looking at graphs that look at climate change, perhaps over time. So they're going to need those skills in mathematics for number operations and data analysis. They're going to engage deeply in persuasive text because it might be formal writing, it might be articles that they're reading, they might be writing letters to somebody to say, this is something I believe in. In art, they might be engaging in how art can communicate a particular message, like this Banksy. I don't know if you've heard of Banksy. He's quite a famous artist and he does things a little bit differently. No one knows his real identity. But in England, in one of the villages, I don't know if you would call it art, but it's basically this sign. It says, I don't believe in global warming, but you can already see how the water level is decreasing there. So art can also be a statement and a way to communicate, and can be an action that happens. So you've got all the components and you've got the subject areas there, science, social studies, but they're not at the forefront. It's more the concepts. So that's just a small example of how transdisciplinary curriculum is relevant and significant, but looks different. Finally, in that last outer circle, we come back to the beginning, go full circle. It's really about international mindedness. And what do we mean by international mindedness? Well, on one aspect, it's that learner profile that we talked about, because that's the kind of person who we believe is an internationally minded person. But it's also going beyond this idea of food, festivals, flags, and different countries, which is all very interesting to know. But actually, if we really want to consider ourselves as a global community with shared humanity, we need to go beyond that. So all of our programs and embedded in our curriculum really look at how we can have that other perspective of people who may have different perspectives, but may also be right. And that's very much built into not just working with our children, but working with our parents and our teachers as well. So expect to hear about some of these words, being caring, open-minded, knowledgeable, if your children are going to a PYP school. So that's really, in a nutshell, the elements of an IB PYP program. And obviously they look different in each school because school contexts are very different in themselves. And as the IB, how do we work with schools? I know you had some questions about that. So our view is really very much a partnership with schools, and we look at 4 key areas where the schools align with their purpose. We're like, hey, this is our mission statement. Are you on board with this? Do you buy into this? And many schools do, because these are the things that are common in education. So we look at that. We help schools create a firm foundation in terms of policies and documentation to make sure that they've got a good foundation to support learning. Really, that's what it's all about. And making sure that the environment for learning is also appropriate for learning for that age group. So we look at that in the context of the school. So a school in India, we look at, you know, how are you bringing in your local context? How are you meeting your local needs? And how does that align with IB philosophy? So alongside that, we provide a very structured and supportive process. We actually evaluate schools, we visit them, we provide reports to schools on how they're doing. We provide training and a number of resources, and an ongoing reflection and evaluation period throughout a school's relationship with us. So that's really the ways that we work with schools, and I'm happy to answer questions on that a little later. But if you do want to know more about the IB, you can log on to our website. We have a public website, and there is lots of information for parents there. You can check out this link or scan the QR code. And yeah, learn more about the IB. It's a really exciting program, and I definitely find joy in it, and I hope you do too. So that's all from me. I'm going to hand back to Miss Mariam, I think.
Thank you, Ms. Monita, for your perspective on the sense of purpose and achievement in joyful learning. It was truly a thought-provoking presentation. The way you laid emphasis on IB's why and how of the program, student agency emphasis, and on learner profile attributes, the need for a shift in the outlook of desoiling the curriculum to approaches to teaching and learning that is collaborative and relevant. Wow, that is truly, I mean, so good. The only way we can be ready for an uncertain future is by working on the approach and not the content. What a beautiful responsibility we as educators have in helping our children be aligned locally and globally. Thank you for making us realize the mammoth task ahead of us, which is the most rewarding. I would now like to introduce Mr. Sheelam Seth, CEO, Shri Educare Limited. Mr. Sheelam, an engineering graduate from BITS Pilani, joined SRF Limited as a management trainee in the fluorochemicals business space. He moved to sales and marketing of fluorochemicals business and provided an able leadership, launched several products, and ensured SRF as the market leaders in the refrigerant gas and chloromethanes. He moved to technical textile business and led the business turnaround of the acquired unit of belting fabric in South Africa. His strong orientation towards SRF values, development of people, maturity to handle diversity, and patient listening is worth emulating. He believes in building strong and effective team and has a strong customer focus. Thank you for joining us today, sir. And I now request you to address the gathering. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Mariam. I hope I am clear. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
I just need a nod. Thank you so much. Namaste, parents. Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Monita, for such an insightful session on joy. I really appreciate the way you have expressed it. And in fact, I take a lot of things, and I take joy as one of the things which I'll take it for 2022. Or maybe my lifelong. So that's one thing which I think so we all of us have to imbibe in it. Okay, namaste parents. And I would like to say one thing. The power of new beginning is immense. And I think so that's a very important statement which I'm making, because any new beginning, if it is put across with an expansion, it just gives an reassurance that we are going in the right direction. And why I say this so is the way And I'm so happy. And on behalf of SEL, I would like to congratulate the entire team of TSRA, the way they actually led the TSUS and made such a beautiful institution and gave such a good gift to the residents of Hyderabad. It's really, really appreciative. All this could have not happened had the parent community not come into the picture. And I would like to thank all the parents in making this happen and building up a strong Shri community. And thank you so much, all of you, for making this as a success story. But life doesn't end here. And I would like to congratulate Ms. Sindhura and Ms. Aishwarya for laying down the foundation for the Shri Ram Academy, and especially for the parents who are really looking in for providing international curriculum to their kids in the city of Hyderabad. Ms. Aishwarya and Sindhura have been really dedicated and will been working very hard in terms of ensuring this particular thing. We at SEL will always remain, and we have been in the past and will always remain, a true supporter and will extend all the support and the strength required to make this dream into a reality. I would also like to mention the name of Padam Shri Ms. Manju Bharatram, who always believed in creating spaces in the minds where students wanted to learn at their own pace. As we know, in such a tough and competitive environment, kids really get led away into a journey where they are not able to keep pace. But the way the curriculum is designed for the IB is definitely, it's the interest as well as the affection and the drive for the kids to take their own journey. We will create a new culture, I can assure you, and I really assure all the parents that this will be a place of learning which all of us will really appreciate. The Shri legacy will be carried forward, and I'm quite happy that the way things are going up, we will definitely be quite successful. I would like to thank the entire team of TSRA of working so hard, and I'm sure we will get all the support from the parents. Thanks a lot, and I'm sure we will have several questions for the panel to really address. I'm sure parents, you will be quite inquisitive to get various doubts which are there, which will be sorted out. And thank you very much for inviting me for this. Namaste. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Namaste, sir. Thank you for your warm wishes and blessings. Your vision and mission will definitely help us in taking the Shri legacy to successful heights. Let us now move on to our panel discussion segment. We have with us Dr. Jyoti Reddy, the Director of Education, the Shri Ram Hyderabad Schools, and founder principal of the Shri Ram Universal School, Hyderabad, as the moderator for the panel discussion. Dr. Jyoti Reddy is a passionate educationist, a great colleague and an inspiring leader, a proud Rotarian, a life and executive coach, and much more. Jyoti ma'am dons all these hats with much elan. A recipient of the exemplary COVID-19 Pandemic Edu Leader Award from the Education World's 2021, the Rex Karamveer Award, the Rashtriya Shiksha Ratan Award, the Progressive Principal Award, the Hall of Fame Award in 2019, the Women Leadership Award in 2020 and 21, the COVID-19 Women Heroes from Education Sector on International Women's Day 2021 are just a few of the many accolades to her credits. These awards and accolades are a result of her passion and consistent efforts to make a difference in every sphere of her work. With every award or accolade, she raises the bar of her responsibility and expectations of herself. It is now time to introduce our first panelist for the day, Mr. Mahesh Balakrishnan, Development and Recognition Manager, India and Nepal International Baccalaureate. A passionate teacher and mentor, Mr. Mahesh brings in a decade plus of experience in education. He has worked across higher and primary education, online learning and technology in education in the fields of simulation and gamified learning. He also conducts corporate workshops. His experience includes working with regulators, policymakers, and industry leaders. He has been active in the student mentoring and providing them various career paths to higher education. Students who have been mentored by him have been admitted to institutions like Johns Hopkins, Oxford, National University of Singapore, and many more. We are humbled and grateful to Mr. Mahesh, who joins us today as a pillar of support and strength, making this occasion even more special with his presence.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Welcome, sir, and thank you for your time and gracious presence today. Our second panelist is none other than our keynote speaker, Ms. Monita Sen, International Baccalaureate, the Primary Years Program Authorization Manager. It is very unfortunate that our third panelist for the day, Ms. Sapna Yadav, Vice President Operations, Shri Educare Limited, is not able to join us today due to personal emergency. I am sure that our panelists, Ms. Monita and Mr. Mahesh, will pitch in for Ms. Sapna and take on the questions from our moderator, Dr. Jyoti Reddy. It feels amazing to see all the stalwarts from the IB world on our TSRA platform. Thank you for joining us, and over to you, Jyoti ma'am.
Thank you, Mariam. Namaste and a very warm welcome to one and all. Thank you, Ms. Monita, for such an enriching presentation and for reiterating the point that education of tomorrow will focus on a combination of student engagement in learning, inquiry-based approaches, curiosity building, imagination, and design thinking. So in a nutshell, the shift towards the international baccalaureate might be the answer to the need of education of the future. Let's explore this statement through our today's panel discussion. So after such an enriching presentation by Ms. Monita, and before we get into an in-depth discussion and specifics, I propose to begin today's session with our esteemed panel, simplifying the concept of IB-PYP for the benefit of members of the audience. So Mr. Mahesh and Ms. Monita, now I request you both to give exactly 1 minute capsule of IB-PYP simplified for from your perspective.
Monita, you go first. Hi.
Okay, yeah, sure. For me, the encapsulation of PYP is really about putting the student first, putting the student at the center and engaging them in things that they're interested. So this idea of agency, I'm really fascinated by this idea of agency and learners really having that sense of achievement, because that for me is where the motivation comes and the joy, as we spoke about earlier. I think the key elements of the program are really the ones that I spoke about, but the transdisciplinary nature, for me, that is something that's quite unique to us. There are other programs that do this. I know in Finland, it's called phenomena-based learning, but it's aimed more at the middle year students. So it's quite a unique approach in organizing learning in this way, and it makes it hugely engaging. For young learners and for teachers as well. So, and all of that within the context of global and local, or GLONACL, if you like, global, national, local, I think really makes it something that's unique and can fit into any framework. So it's not prescriptive. And that's the great thing of how it looks different in different schools, but it aligns to these core values of international mindedness, agency, inquiry, constructivism. So for me, that model that we looked at, that really encapsulates all of the good things, all of the juicy things about the PYP.
Thank you. Mr. Mahesh, in 1 minute.
Yes. For me, the beauty about the PYP is not only the joy of going to school, but also the joy of learning. And it has got everything for all the stakeholders. For the student, it is the fundamental student-centric learning and student agency, of course. For parents, happy children. For schools, it's an experience, a flexible approach which they can provide. And overall impacting the community. That's the beauty about the PYP. And when I visit PYP schools, I wish I had studied in a PYP school.
Thank you for that simple and crisp capsule that you have given. So my association with IB has been a cherished journey in itself as a leader of international school in my past experience. So for me, my 1 minute capsule is, I'm not going to delve deeper into it, but I would like to just put it in a nutshell to say that IB program is an all-encompassing and a multifaceted approach to nurturing a child to realize their beautiful dreams through lifelong learning in an engaged environment, being happy and discovering self. So when I was going through the slide of IB mission statement, I was super excited. Do you know why, Ms. Monita? Because the TSRA vision and mission statements are completely aligned with IB mission statement. So I was super excited that we are going to take this forward. So in today's thought exchange, my aim is to elicit the different aspects of IB that will help understand how at TSRA, education is a joyful pursuit of excellence and how well aligned the philosophy of TSRA is with that of IB. So with that thought, I would like to start today's thought exchange. So Monita, you have mentioned that it is transdisciplinary approach, and nowhere I could see that there is textbook usage in IB curriculum, right? So the first change that a parent needs to accept stepping into IB PYP is absence of textbooks. So what do you think is the rationale behind this approach?
Yeah, sure. This is a common one. And I think, first of all, we have to bust a myth that it's not that textbooks are bad. Okay. They're not some kind of evil thing that's designed. You know, they can be very supportive. We've all learned with them, right? When it's just that when we're looking at an approach to learning that is driven by concepts, and by a student's interest and by the context of a school. So if your school is built next to a beautiful environment like a lake or a mountain, then a lot of your learning is going to be quite relevant to that. You're going to want to try and bring in your environment, and no one textbook is going to be absolutely accurate for everybody's interests and everybody's environment, right? So textbooks are really like they're a resource, right? Textbooks are a resource. And what can happen in traditional sense with textbooks is you start on page 1 and you go through up to page 100 and you just that becomes a syllabus. That doesn't leave room for agency for the child. That doesn't leave room to move in and out of learning and to be responsive and to have dialogue and engage with resources in our environment. So that's one of the reasons why we say that textbooks, they're not bad. It's not that you won't use them. They might be there. They just don't drive the learning. They're just resources. And finally, with our schools, what we see is that eventually they don't need the textbooks because that was a scaffolding that they've outgrown. When they're learning, their first question is, where are the resources in the environment? What are my primary and secondary resources that I can engage with children so they are motivated to learn? Children are rarely motivated by a textbook, let's be honest.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm really impressed when you said that your school has a lake view. Thank you that you have acknowledged that we are going to be a learning environment close to the nature. Thank you so much for that. Moving from textbooks to examination pattern, again the question goes to Monita. I'm helpless because you are PYP authorization head, so you are the actual person to give me this answer. So moving from textbooks to examination pattern, the IB doesn't set examinations or moderate grades in the primary years program. Do you think it's a good idea to not have examination in the formative years? If yes, then why? And if so, then how is the students' learning measured? Because in the Indian context, measuring the students' learning is very, very critical to the parents. Hope you understood from where I'm coming from.
Yes, I've worked in schools in India, so but this is one of the most challenging things, I think, for teachers as well, who have come from traditional backgrounds. And I think again, it's about myth busting. So the first thing is that let's talk about rigor in assessment. I think we have to unpack what we mean by that word rigor. And a lot of people have the misconception that rigor comes from exams. And if we look at what is an exam is basically, from our experience, it was a set body of knowledge, and you have to demonstrate your understanding by answering these questions, mostly in a written form, sometimes labeling diagrams. So for me, assessment is about demonstrating understanding. And if you look at the research on assessment, rigor comes from what we call continuous assessment. And rigor or depth of learning is not just about being able to regurgitate that. I mean, I've taken hundreds of exams in my life, but if you ask me to remember any of those facts right now, that's quite difficult. What did we write? We write the exam and then we're like, yay, it's over, and we forget. The type of knowledge and the type of learning we're interested in is that one that lasts and is enduring understanding. So not something that you forget after 40 minutes, 40 hours, or 40 days, but something that's with you for life. So maybe 40 years, right? And if I ask you honestly, what from your exams is still with you? I think what's more with you is the experiences that you had where you were engaged in learning, and that depth of learning happens. So it's not that we don't want depth of learning and that we don't want rigor, but examination is just a test, is just one way of looking at it. And I like to think of it as a snapshot, right?
Yeah.
So if you take a photograph of a child, that's the exam result. It's those results at that time. You don't know if that child had a tummy ache, if he had a fight with his brother in the morning. That exam, that one picture doesn't give you the whole picture of a child. So we need to look at assessment as a scrapbook, a whole photo album that has different angles, that has little videos, that really talks to where the child is in their learning. And for me, that is rigor, not an examination.
Fantastic, because the entire curriculum is revolving around the child. So when you spoke about continuous assessment, and the rigor is in continuous assessment, not just a snapshot. So that gives the flexibility to the child, to learn at his own phase and take assessments at his own phase. And it is going to be lifelong learning, and the concepts are very strong. When the child learns a concept in a free environment, fantastic. So this indeed clarifies the two most critical apprehensions of a parent during decision making. We also know that IBPYP is gaining popularity with each passing day. So we recently heard of the Delhi government schools offering the IBPYP. So what does this mean to the Indian education landscape? Now I request Mr. Mahesh to shed some light on this and also help us understand what are the advantage of an IB education. If the child goes through the complete continuum of IB education, what are the advantages?
Sure, thank you. So yes, we did the Delhi government agreement with Delhi schools, and they are with Monita's safe hands. So that keeps us happy. What it has done is it has democratized international education in the Indian context. That's the first word I would like to use. And it has made IB education aware. What is an IB? Many schools, many educators all over India, especially tier 2, tier 3, they woke up and they said, if the Delhi government or the Delhi board can do it, so can we. One, it makes it accessible. And IB education is inclusive, it is accessible. And one of the myths which I want to bust as a continuum is that people say IB students cannot do NEET or JEE. Every day I face this question, and I'm happy to say Indian students who take the IBDP or the CP can go into JEE or NEET. This year, I'm talking about 2021, our students have got into NEET and other prestigious institutions, including Delhi University. Okay, where we hear the headlines, it's 100% required for admission, but our students do get into Delhi University one. And just happy to share on this platform again that with the Mumbai University, what they have done is they have not only recognized the IBCP, as a qualification equivalent to grade 12. They've also allowed students to apply with provisional scores or predicted grades, as we call it. So that is the kind of recognition which is now happening in India with the IB education, the IB program. Now, you asked me what is the continuum of IB education. I love to use this favorite phrase when I speak to schools and educators. And IB education lies between Tare Zameen Par and Three Idiots. Okay, and to sum it up all, I would like to say it prepares them how to learn. They move away from rote learning. So I say the foundations are solid when they start with the IB PYP. They get an acquired knowledge which helps them in middle years. They learn how to learn applied learning. And when they go to DP and CP and then get into university, it helps them for university life. The first year of university education becomes a breeze because they have learned to be self-directed learners. That is very important. As schools, their children are very connected in schools. The schools actually mollycoddle them. But when you go into college and university level, you are independent. You learn to multitask. When you get into industry, it's all about multitasking. And IB education provides you that readiness to handle challenges of life. The jobs of the future might change, but the skills of the future are taught really in an IB school.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mahesh, because it has doubled the confidence of the entire team here, including the audience, because there are a lot of apprehensions. Recently, when I met a parent also, the biggest apprehension is, I'm okay with everything. I'm completely convinced with what you are saying, Jyoti ma'am. But my only question is, if my child is going through IBDP, till 12, that is, if he takes up IBDP diploma program, will he be able to survive the competition in the Indian scenario in facing the competitive examinations? So with the evidence, you mentioning that recently IBDP children have got into prestigious universities, including Delhi University, and cracking competitive exams like JEE. So it has really built the confidence. And the beauty of IB Continuum, how you explained that in PYP, the child understands or knows or learns how to learn. And in MYP, it is about applied learning. And diploma program makes the child completely ready for university education. It's a beautiful transition there. You explained, the way you explained has really clarified a lot of doubts. I think the audience will definitely agree with me. Thank you so much, Mr. Mahesh. And also the assurance by giving the details of Delhi government, why it has taken up IBDP. It's going to be an example when a government takes up PYP program as its core. It's actually giving a lot of confidence to other governments also, and the parents, in fact, about the confidence in the program. Thank you so much. So after getting the highlights of the essence of IB education, and once we got the understanding of the advantages of IB, I would now like to invite Ms. Monita to help me with the next pertinent question. It's evident that the IB certainly leaves no stone unturned in terms of, making the schools get ready for the right environment. It leaves no stone unturned in ensuring the school's readiness before commencement with all the standards and practices set out by the IB board. Yet, parents hesitate to enroll their child in a new school offering an IB curriculum, as they are not sure about the competency of the school to transact the PYP in its truest form. So how can a school measure its readiness to offer the PYP? That's first question, Ms. Monita. What should parents look out for how does the IB ensure school readiness? Though you have mentioned that IB is there to support the schools with resources, with guidance, but can you please be more specific and in detail mention about do IB teachers receive any special training? How does the board, IB board, ensures that the school is now ready? And how do parents get confidence to enroll in a new PYP school or new IB school?
Yeah, great. That's lots of questions. But that's very much what my role is. My day-to-day work is involved in this kind of thing. So your first question is about how do we know if a school's ready? So as a school, how do you know? So the beginning of our process is really very much about the alignment of values. So we ask schools to do a feasibility study. And we ask them to involve all their stakeholders in that. So very much like you're doing right now, you're involving parents because we don't want any surprises. It's something that we want the entire community to say, yes, this is the type of education we want. This is aligned with our values, right? So really that's the first step. Readiness is about, I am ready to receive, right? I'm ready to go on this journey. So that is the first phase. And obviously we look at that phase saying, okay, are you a school? Do you have a building? Are you legally registered? All of those kind of things we look at just to make sure you've got those foundational blocks in place. And then particularly for our PYP and our MYP programs, our DP and our CP are a little different in the process because you have to first be authorized before you can begin teaching. But for PYP and MYP, really the journey begins. And what we do is we assign each school and each program an experienced educator. It could be somebody who works locally in a school, who's a head of a school or a coordinator in a school in India or somewhere, you know, in another country. But that person will have the experience of being in an authorized setting themselves and taking a school through authorization. So they become like a mentor or a critical friend. And they really guide the school, but we also support school agency, you know, not just student agency, but it has to be your own journey and it has to be for your context. You know your community best, and really we're there just to support you. We do have some compliance aspects. So we say, look, you've got to commit to this. Your learning and teaching has to look like this. You have to have some documentation that supports that. So really for at least 1 year, we have a minimum requirement that for a year, you go through this trial implementation. We call it a candidate school. And only when we are satisfied. So we will visit the school. At the moment, we're doing a lot of that virtually because of COVID. But yeah, we will visit the school at least twice during the course of this time and make sure that you are ready. We like to set you up for success. So there are lots of checkpoints, lots of reports that you get. And we expect that you bring your learning community along with you. So it's one of our requirements that parent information session happens and that there's clear communication that goes on. So I think that's some of the things parents can look for. And for parents, I think the biggest indicator for you is your children. When I'm on a verification visit and we meet with parents during that time, we meet with a group of parents independently for 360-degree feedback. I always ask parents, tell me, what is it that you notice since the school became a PYP school? And it's hundreds of schools I've been with, but nearly all of them always say that I notice a change in my child in their confidence, in the way that they're asking questions, in the way that they're engaging, and in their levels of motivation. So for me, I love those meetings. It's amazing feedback. And you really see that difference in the children. So that for me is an indicator. Your third one was about training. And yes, this represents a pretty big shift for teachers, not just parents as well. And I think a lot of the training that teachers go through, it's a great foundation, but sometimes they need to unlearn things and relearn them. But the good thing about it being joyful is that this is an interesting learning program for parents and for teachers as well. So I think we have required training. In the PYP, for example, we require that every single teacher attends a certain workshop so that they have an in-depth knowledge of what they need to do. And we have extensive material that supports them from a pedagogical and a philosophical point of view. So yeah, we expect teachers to upskill themselves and learning is all the better for that. So I think it's an important aspect. Does that answer all of those questions?
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for such a detailed answer. This gives assurance to the audience, especially the parents and even the teachers, that if a school is well planned in advance and get prepared, it is possible to run PYP program very successfully. And the beauty of the support that we get from IB, from your words, that the first year is going to be a trial year, which is called as a candidacy year, wherein the IB also comes into the picture in terms of looking into the checks and balances, the gaps, and gives the training, and every single teacher is supposed to take IB training. Then the parents are also involved in the first year to have interactions with the IB board. Then it gets authorization. So right from day one, it's going to be the collective effort of school, parents, teachers, with the support of IB board. Am I right, Ms. Monita?
Yes, and the support of parents.
Support of the parents, exactly. All the stakeholders are involved in this beautiful journey of the student in PYP program. Wonderful, wonderful. Now, the question is to Mr. Mahesh. So in the best interest of the audience, the question to you is, how are IB schools aligned with the National Education Policy of 2020?
Good. Thank you. I have written extensive notes when the NEP came out. I did my own research on the alignment of NEP with the IB program. And just to share with you, schools which do the IB program, they don't need to align with the NEP, because the NEP is aligned with the IB. Why is that so? Because the NEP, especially the K-12 part of it, draws heavily or is inspired by the IB. Okay, so that's the good part of it. Now, if you look at it program by program, okay, if you look at the PYP itself, they talk about discoverers. We have the inquirers, we have the inquiry-led learning. They are talking about digital literacy and numeracy skills, which are all there. They're also talking about holistic development of the child. Okay, at the early years, and Monita is an expert at that, we have inquiry as play. We encourage that. So I think developing curious mind is the hallmark of the IB PYP, and the NEP would align with that. If you look at the MYP, again, not transdisciplinary, but interdisciplinary, lays the foundation, both subject depth and width. And what happens is we are not leaving the community behind. The community service is always there. And the pandemic has taught us that, our dependence on technology. All of us have started relying more on technology in our day-to-day things. Grade 10 culminates in the very beautiful on-screen examination, the MYP assessment. The only one of its kind in the whole world, as I can see. Many countries don't even have a checkpoint exam, but the IB MYP is that. And what other boards are talking about, the MYP is already there. Okay, and this year we even saw the proctored element of it, very beautifully done. One, when you come to depth again, and we talk about subject foundation, and when they talk about secondary and senior secondary education in the NEP, they are talking about subject choices, subject groups, which is already there in the DP, 6 subject groups. Students can choose one from each group. We have made some changes, mild exceptions for the Indian context. If you look at the percentage transcript or the 3 sciences, so to say, okay, which allows students to go to NEET. And most beautifully, if you look at it, they're talking about continuous teacher training, which is again there in the IB. All the programs need mandatory teacher training. So while we look at school philosophical alignment with the IB, we also insist on mandatory teacher training. Here we call it professional development. We respect them as professionals, we call them as professionals. So that's again something which is there. Now, just to share with you, one of the things which is coming out in the NEP is the local languages, or the stress on local languages. Now, with our experience with Maharashtra and what we are hearing from Karnataka, and I'm sure with Telangana and other states also, they want mandatory their languages. And IB encourages language learning. IB encourages language learning. And what we have seen with Maharashtra, the government itself has appreciated that IB schools comply, number one, and language development both from grade 1 or from grade 6 onwards. We do it beautifully. We allow schools that flexibility, that language learning, especially the second language. And like Monica says on a regular basis, we are local. We encourage schools to adopt local languages and celebration. Okay, it's not just celebrating Halloween. Okay, schools do that. But we also say you can celebrate your Ugadi, you can celebrate your Pongal, your Baisakhi, and so on and so forth. That's the beauty of the IB programs. And NEP is aligned. So if you're looking at NEP alignment, again, I'm reiterating the fact, you don't need to do much. Just comply with IB, the regulations, the TSP, and so on and so forth, and you are in good hands with the NEP.
Thank you. Thank you for such an elaborative answer. You have made us very clear to believe that NEP and IB philosophy are almost aligned. Thank you so much. We are running short of time. Still, if given time, I can shoot n number of questions, but I have last question to Ms. Monita, and after that, I have one more question to Mr. Mahesh. After that, I'm going to give some time to the audience to take audience questions. So, Ms. Monita, now I invite you to come in at this point. You have been instrumental in implementation of PYP in multiple schools and even been a part of the authorization process, which looks into various standards and practices, right? So what advice would you give to parents when considering the choice of a school? What areas should they focus on apart from the fees of a school or proximity in that matter?
Yes, I have lots of friends, and when they're considering schools for their children, they all call me with the same question. And really, you know, this is a very personal, obviously, and subjective to what you want, you know, that view of education that you want for a child. But I think one of the key things is looking at a school and the relationships between members of the school in the community, and the relationships between teachers and students and how they interact. I think you can learn a lot from looking at this, and even looking at it online. Like I said, right now we do all of our observations of learning online into schools, but you can see how children are engaging in a school, and for me that's a great indicator. So relationships, right, is one. And the other one is, you know, the quality of the interaction that students have with their learning, and the way that they can talk about their learning. I think that's also a really important thing for me, about how engaged are the learners. And let me go back to your question. Your question was about what should parents look for in new schools? Yeah, I mean, obviously environments matter. But if this year has taught us anything, now that we might have beautiful buildings, but actually we've not been in them for 18 months. So it's really changed what we focus on in learning. So I think it does come down to relationships for me, and it comes down to leadership. In my experience, the making and breaking of a school is with the leadership. You can have an amazing, beautiful school, and that leader leaves and a new one comes in and it's all turned upside down. So as parents, that's something that, you know, meet with the leadership, make sure that you have values aligned. That's really what you're looking for. If you believe the same thing that the schools believe, then you're all traveling in the same direction. But if you find that your values differ, or, you know, something grates, then obviously you're going to find some challenges. So relationships and values, these are the things to look out for from my view.
Thank you. Your answer made me to just come to this point that it's not just when you are choosing a new school. It's beautiful, Monita, when you said that relationships, values, and the leadership team are the parameters you have to look into it. So during our challenging times, during the crisis and the present situation, all that mattered in a human being life is the relationship, values with which they were together, and the leadership of the family that has saved the families to sail the ocean of the crisis, right? Thank you so much. Relationships, leadership, and the values. focus areas for a parent to choose something for your child, whether it's a new school or moving to another school or giving a course or a program or an activity to your ward. Thank you so much. Mahesh sir, I'm going to put you in a fix with this question, which is very, very important for parents to know to take a wise and informed decision. Why do IB schools have higher fee structures?
Okay. It's bold coming from you as a school asking me this question, but I would like to answer it in two ways. Please allow me that. One is I would give the actual picture, and then I will give you my personal angst as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So first of all, IB does not dictate what fees a school should charge. Number one. Number two is IB amongst all the boards is the most transparent of all boards, which lays out clearly what fees are applicable to schools, and it is listed on a public facing website. I've not seen any other board do that, honestly.
Yeah.
And there are no hidden or other agenda fees involved, be it through the consultancy process, be it through the audit process or anything, or even to become an IB school, we are above board. So that I think should settle the question. Where does high cost come from? Okay, it could come from the piece of real estate a school is operating on. Correct? I cannot expect the real estate cost in Mumbai to be the same, say, if I'm talking in a small village somewhere.
Yes.
One. The kind of teacher salaries, the cost of living differs.
Yes.
And what I've seen is non-IB schools on par charging same fees with IB schools as well. There are many such schools, not just one or two. I'm not talking about the exception. Second, IB insists on professional development. We have to treat teachers as professionals. We have to give them the respect. People should people should opt for teaching as their first choice. It shouldn't be that those who cannot do teach. It should be they want to teach, they can teach, and they will teach. That's very important for me. And IB schools in India are in different. So let us first define where are we. Schools by a sector itself are in the societal sector. Okay, not for profit, minded.
Exactly.
Of course, many people make it a business. That's different. I'm not getting into it because one of my PhD research could be in the areas of EdTech as for profit and schools as not for profit. What a clash of civilization, so to say. But then, if you look at it, we have schools which charge fairly decent fees, and schools like the government schools in Delhi, probably Mumbai, they are not going to charge a single cent. It's going to be free for students. The government is going to bear the cost, and they would also go through the same authorization process which every other school does.
Yeah.
So this question came to me from a school in Delhi where they said, now what happens? We have a IB school or a set of IB school which are going to be free and we charge a certain fee. I said, in my opinion, schools are an experience. It's the experience you provide in your individual school which matters to parents. And school fees are a matter of willing buyer, willing seller. Okay,
Yes.
It's not that a gun is kept on parents' side. No, you have to put your kid in my school. No, it doesn't work that way. That's where my angst comes. Now I'm talking my personal angst over the last 2 years in the education sector in India. Okay, many years, what happens I've seen is parents use every kind of influence to admit their kid in a particular school. They will use every kind of jack or influence to put their kid in a school. But the moment when lockdowns happened, the same parents complain that please, the schools are charging very high. They forget. We look at landscape. The schools, while they were closed, there were gardeners working, there were cleaners working just to keep the school spick and span for your child, your loved one to return safely. So I would say, don't look at fees. If you feel that this is what is required for my child to be happy in a school, go happily. Because otherwise it will impact your child's happiness, the teacher's happiness, and much more. We are going through an existential crisis when it comes to school education in India. This is my personal plea. And I think it's important because, as you know, with the COVID again, everywhere in India, now all schools have closed down, or most of them have closed down in different states. It's important that we as school educators and the parent community at large support each other. So again, I would say, That fees are not, high fees is not a problem of only IB schools. It's a separate matter. And judicial intervention has also happened, which we cannot comment upon. So we'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again. Breaking the ice about the fee structure. If I have to, recap of what you have mentioned, the fee structures depend on the location of the school. The real estate picture comes into the scenario, and the training of every single teacher in specific with IB board, and the resources that the school provides to the child, and added to the curriculum, what extra niche that the school is creating to the child or the parent, right? And the authorization process, the statutory requirements of getting authorization in terms of IB fee structure or whatever it is. So any other, and thank you for bringing to the forefront that not only IB, but the national board schools are also running with the same fee structures as IB. That's fantastic, because it's nothing to do with the curricula. It is about what that school is providing to your child, and it is your choice. It's not the schools that are forcing parents to join the children in the school. You have to look into different parameters and aspects, and how your child is getting benefit of joining in a particular school. If you are completely convinced, and then it becomes a well-informed decision. Thank you so much, Mr. Mahesh. Really, you have broken the ice in a very subtle and very, very, focused way. Thank you so much. Now I request Sunita ma'am to just look into the chat box if we have any questions from audience.
Yeah. Namaste ma'am. So we have one question from Mr. Pavan. Is IB curriculum recognized for domestic admissions as well, say in Indian universities, including IITs, IIMs, NIT, UPSC, UGC, etc. And another member has asked about how well does this applied learning help in some of the competitive exams in India, in case the child prefers engineering or medical sciences. So both, I think, are similar type of questions. A part of it has been answered, but maybe one of the panelists can take it up.
Monica, you want me to answer, or would you want to go?
You go ahead, Mahesh. This is more your area.
Okay. So yes, IB schools are, and IB students are eligible to apply to different universities, IFS, UPSC, you name it. We are allowed, and our students do apply, they join. A lot of our students go into civil services. It's an unknown fact. You won't find it on Quora, but our students do join that. Okay. Now coming down to applied learning, see, learning always helps. And when you are facing that time to pressure, okay, it's that an entrance exam is a function of time and your knowledge and your ability to handle pressure. So that applied learning moves you away from rote learning, and you are able to do better in competitive exams. And one of the reasons I will share with you is that IB students do very well in SATs. They don't need to go for additional coaching to do SATs. And many universities, even in India, will go for the X factor. Okay, I've sat on university panels globally, and I can tell you that we look for the X factor. So doing away with only the academic results. So applied learning helps. It stays with you for life. And I'll say, why are you learning only for competitive exams? That would be my counter question. Okay, look for learning. Entrance exams, success in results is something else. Learn for life.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mahesh. There is, I think, this Miss Monita can answer. This is from Miss Vignata. How are we assuring the child to teacher interaction is adequate, which I feel is essential for child-centric, where both teacher and parent play a major role? Is there any particular teacher-student ratio to be followed in the IB?
That's a great question. We don't define a specific ratio, but the nature of inquiry-based learning, really, we recommend 1:25 as a maximum. That's a general recommended ratio. I mean, if you look at educational research, this is outside of early years education. Okay, so I'm talking about standard primary education, and I would say that majority of our schools have the ratio of 1:20, 1:25. There are some schools. I personally have taught a class of 30, and it's possible, but you know, it becomes more challenging at that time. And this is different now with an online learning environment, right? As well as that. So for early years, the ratios are generally much smaller, and those are the recommended ratios for children as well, because you have different needs in young learners. So that's it in terms of ratios. But when you're talking about child to teacher interaction, so that's an interesting one as well in an inquiry-based environment, especially one that promotes learners to be independent. So one of the things that I always used to talk to my teachers about was teacher talk time, you know, and just reflecting on their own learning. And really, with a sense of agency, the teacher should not be doing a lot of talking in the classroom. The engagement should be coming from the students, and the discussion and the dialogue should be coming more from them. So that's the sort of thing I look for when I'm in an IB classroom. You know, how are the children? Are there opportunities for them to be grouped and regrouped? You know, is differentiation happening in terms of, you know, our children having the opportunity to work with different types of children, to work around their interests? So those are really the things that I focus on in terms of quality, what I would call quality interactions. And the other part of that is feedback to students. And that's a big part of assessment as well. How are we giving children feedback on what they're learning? And you know, on the mistakes that they make, and how are those opportunities for learning? Someone right at the beginning of this presentation talked about failure as an opportunity in her just a minute talk. So I think that's also something that is a quality of the interaction between teacher and student.
So Sunita ma'am, I have a question which has been sent from FB, I think, on my WhatsApp. Monita, this is for you. The past year has been different. So how do you think as the program design and implementation supported virtual learning for students in the PYP? Going forward also, unfortunately, it shouldn't happen, but if it goes to the virtual learning environment, the next academic year also, as you are observing schools past 1.5 years and the virtual authorizations, virtual evaluations are happening. So how was the program design and implementation happened in PYP in this pandemic period?
Yeah. This, like all areas, I mean, this was a totally big blow to education, particularly primary education, and even more so early years, right? Where those formative experiences are so important. Yes, it has been challenging, but in terms of our pedagogy, I think when you have a view about learning, so I view learning in this way, I have a theory of learning. That doesn't change just because I'm working online. The way that I believe children learn, yes, the tools are going to change, the amount of time that we have, we've seen a lot of curriculum compacting because children have only a certain amount of time to be online. And really, we're beginning to get back the first year of research globally from what this has meant. And all of the research has resoundingly come back saying social emotional development is key. And I think Mahesh also mentioned this about resilience. You know, this myths about gaps in learning and children won't know what they've learned in these last 18 months has been so essential. We don't know what's coming in the future, you know. This might just be one small pandemic. There might be something else that happens in the future. So that learning how to learn and being an independent learner and being able to find your own joy, right? I think we have to stop thinking that we're replicating schooling online. We cannot do that. And that is painful for children. And my gosh, it's painful for parents. Hats off to you, parents. You have become the teachers in the last 18 months. And I know now you appreciate everything that we teachers do in the classroom a little bit extra. So thank you for being there for them. But, you know,
And the rise of the grandparents.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, I think it hasn't changed. We've seen tools like Zoom is adapting all the time. Breakout rooms wasn't there in the beginning. This is a direct response to our need for social interaction and to break off into groups and to talk about something. And teachers have become, they've just absorbed it, you know, they are there for the children. So it looks different, yes, but our philosophy and our commitment to constructivism does not change. And I say that to schools. You haven't stopped being a PYP school just because you're online. And we evaluate you on your approaches to learning as well. So
thank you.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for enlightening us to understand that alongside our changing notions of what constitutes education of the future, our ideas about the way teaching learning happens and the parents' expectations from schools must also be reshaped. Curriculum, teaching and learning already extends well beyond the classroom and will continue to do so. And as education changes to suit the future's needs, a shift towards a more personalized learning experience that makes them analysts, planners, collaborators, curriculum experts, synthesizers, problem solvers, and researchers. I think this is where we are going ahead with such beautiful curriculum. Thank you so much for your thoughts. The way you really made us enlightened with the curriculum is really, really appreciated, highly commendable. Over to Mariam now.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, everyone. The panel discussion indeed gave deeper insights into all the aspects that parents regularly have on their minds. Yes. And thank you for joining us and giving us a thorough understanding on the joy of learning education for the future. Dear audience, I appreciate your attention and time. And the link to access the feedback form is given in the chat box. Would appreciate if you could just give in your valuable feedback on this webinar. Once again, on behalf of the Shri Ram Academy, I would like to thank each one of you for being here. Hoping to meet you soon in the next fascinating webinar. Namaste.
Thank you, Dr. Jyoti.
Thank
and
you.
everyone else.
It's
Thank you,
a
Sunita,
great
Mariam,
honor.
Monica, Mr. Said. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mahesh sir. Thank you, Monita ma'am. Thank you, Mr.
everyone.
Sheelam.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And thanks, parents. Thank you so much.
Yes, yes.